Lanterns bloomed across the Wolf King's gardens like captured stars, each flame trembling as dusk surrendered to evening. Music drifted between hedges trimmed into obedient shapes, and laughter, light, practiced, unkind, rose and fell with the rustle of silk. Carriages had arrived in steady procession, bearing families polished to the edge of cruelty, and among them came the fourth daughter, whose name was spoken less often than her sister's, as though it required effort. She stepped onto the gravel with careful grace, her gloved hands folded, her spine aligned by habit rather than pride. Tonight's invitation had been addressed to the family, her presence was tolerated, not expected. Her sisters moved ahead in a small, shining storm, 3 bright gowns, 3 confident smiles, leaving her a pace behind. They spoke without turning, the words aimed backward like tossed pebbles. "Nobody wants you," one said softly, so softly it pretended to be concern. Another laughed and adjusted a ribbon. "You should stay near the hedges, where the light is kind." The third, older and sharper, offered the mercy of truth, "Do not embarrass us by hoping." The fourth daughter inclined her head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement of a familiar weather. Shame had long taught her how to stand still. The gardens were a careful miracle, roses trained into obedience, paths smoothed by wealth, fountains rehearsing eternity. Gentlemen leaned into conversation, eyes skimming for advantage. Ladies gathered in clusters, measuring gowns and prospects with the same cool arithmetic. Invitations were currency, glances were wagers. The fourth daughter felt the pressure of the scene settle upon her like a borrowed coat, warm enough to wear, never truly hers. She carried no scandal, no fortune to rescue her, no face that demanded turning heads. What she possessed was quieter, a composure learned in neglect, a listening that made others feel briefly important before they forgot her again. Her sisters were already claimed by attention. Compliments slid easily toward them, landing with practiced delight. She was passed over with politeness sharpened by omission. When names were announced near the pavilion, hers was not among them. The pause where it should have been lingered, then vanished, and conversation flowed around the absence. A polite gentleman glanced her way, uncertain, then followed the safer path of laughter elsewhere. She felt the familiar tightening behind the ribs, that inward brace that keeps dignity upright when the world presses too close. She drifted toward the outer ring of lanterns, where shadows softened judgment. From there, the party became a painted scene, framed by leaves. She watched her sisters tilt their heads, display teeth, perform ease. She noted the choreography of desire, the angle of shoulders, the careful distance maintained, the way power announced itself by not needing to. Somewhere at the heart of the gathering stood the Alpha King, the Wolf King of rumor and restraint, a presence rather than a spectacle. His title moved like a low whine through the crowd. She did not look at him, she had learned not to study doors meant to remain closed. A server passed with a tray of crystal. She declined with a smile that cost her nothing. The night smelled of cut grass and candle smoke, of petals bruised underfoot. A breeze lifted the hem of her gown, modest and well-mended, and she anchored herself with a breath. "You are here," she told herself, "which is enough." Her mother's voice lived in that sentence, a remnant of encouragement preserved like pressed flowers. The thought steadied her. The sisters noticed her absence from notice and mistook it for opportunity. They approached, circling as if by chance. "You see," the eldest murmured, kindness edged with steel, "we told you so. A girl without prospects should not wander where hopes grow loud." Another sister gestured toward the crowd, her smile fixed. "It confuses people." The fourth daughter met their eyes one by one, offering nothing they could bruise. She did not retreat, she did not plead. The restraint unsettled them more than tears would have. A murmur rippled near the pavilion, subtle as a tide turning. A space opened where none had been moments before. She felt it before she saw it, the quiet rearrangement that precedes consequence. Footsteps approached, unhurried, confident without noise. The sisters stiffened, recalculating. The fourth daughter lifted her gaze at last, not to seek, but because presence has weight. The Alpha King stood within the lantern light, his attention fixed not on brilliance, but on the stillness at its edge. And in that moment, the garden learned her name, whether it wished to or not. He regarded her as one regards a landscape after rain, measuring what has changed and what endures. The crowd leaned in without seeming to, a collective breath caught behind fans and cuffs. Her sister's smiles thinned, calculations failed them. She felt suddenly, keenly visible, not as a curiosity but as a person shaped by years. The Alpha King did not speak at once. He allowed the pause to do its work, a silence that acknowledged her existence without apology. When he inclined his head, it was neither conquest nor courtesy, but recognition. She answered with a bow learned at home, honest and unadorned. The world tilted, ever so slightly. Somewhere a laugh died unfinished. The lantern seemed to burn steadier. She felt no triumph, only the strange relief of being addressed at last, as if a door had opened not into promise, but into air. The sisters drew back, the hedge of their confidence clipped in an instant. Around them, the party resumed its breathing, altered. Whispers threaded through the roses. "Why her?" the knight asked. The fourth daughter held the question without fear. For the first time, the shame that had trained her loosened its grip, not gone, but challenged. She stood where she had chosen to stand, and the Alpha King remained, his attention unbroken. In that stillness, a future shifted its weight, preparing to step forward. Fate waited, listening, before the next breath. The Alpha King did not raise his voice, yet the garden seemed to lean toward him, lantern flames drawing closer as if to listen. Conversation softened into a hush threaded with expectancy, and the fourth daughter felt the attention settle upon her shoulders like a mantle she had never been taught to wear. He spoke her name clearly, without flourish, granting it a weight it had not carried before. The sound traveled outward, stirring curiosity, envy, and something sharper, and she answered with composure that surprised even her. Years of being overlooked had trained her for silence, not for being summoned into light. Her sisters recovered first, stepping forward with smiles carefully rebuilt, eager to reclaim the moment as theirs. The eldest offered a compliment edged with ownership, as if presenting an object long dismissed but suddenly valuable. The Alpha King acknowledged her with a nod so precise it ended the attempt. His gaze returned to the fourth daughter, steady and inquisitive, and in that attention lay a choice that unsettled the careful mathematics of the night. He gestured toward a nearby seat, neither command nor plea, an invitation framed as courtesy. She hesitated only long enough to honor herself, then accepted. They walked together through the press of bodies, a narrow corridor opening before them. Whispers rose and tangled, speculation blooming faster than roses. Some voices carried pity, others alarm. A few sharpened into judgment. She felt each word as a brush of cold air, yet she did not shrink. She noted the Alpha King's pace, measured to match her own, and the small adjustment of his arm that kept others from intruding. The gesture was subtle, unmistakable, and it landed among the onlookers like a dropped glass, shattering assumptions without sound. Seated near the fountain, where water stitched silver lines into the dark, she felt the knight draw close. He asked her about the gardens, about the music, about her journey, questions that sought no spectacle. She answered honestly, choosing simplicity over performance. With each exchange, the distance between them shortened, not in inches but in understanding. He listened as one listens to a truth that might alter plans. When she spoke of her sisters, her voice neither accused nor defended. It merely stated a fact shaped by years, and the Alpha King's mouth tightened, not in anger, but in thought. Across the lawn, the sisters watched, calculating damage. Their laughter rang too bright, their gestures exaggerated. Friends leaned in, hungry for interpretation. The party, once confident in its hierarchies, wavered. Someone remarked upon the impropriety of attention misapplied. Someone else countered with the romance of surprise. The debate unfolded in glances and raised brows, and the fourth daughter felt herself become a question posed to the room. She did not answer it. She allowed the Alpha King's presence to speak. A server approached, tray balanced with care. The Alpha King accepted a glass and passed it to her first. The offering was small, yet it carried a charge that raced through the gathering. She took it, fingers brushing crystal, and the contact steadied her. The wine tasted of summer kept too long, pleasant and restrained. She sipped, eyes on the fountain, and felt her breath align with the rhythm of the water. The night did not ask her to be grateful. It asked her to be present. He spoke again, lower now, words shaped for her alone. He asked what she desired from the evening. The question startled her with its generosity. Desire had been framed for her as impractical, embarrassing, dangerous. She considered, then answered with care. "I wish to leave unashamed," she said, and the honesty of it struck him silent. In that pause, something shifted. He inclined his head, acknowledging a courage that did not announce itself. The music changed, a new melody unfurling from the pavilion, and couples began to move. A space opened between them, expectant. The Alpha King rose and offered his hand, not as spectacle but as continuation. The room inhaled. She felt the familiar pull of retreat, the instinct to protect herself by declining, but she recognized the cost of that safety. She stood and placed her hand in his, the contact firm, respectful. They crossed the grass together, and the whispers swelled, now threaded with disbelief. As they danced, the world narrowed to measured steps and shared balance. He did not lead with dominance, he listened through motion, adjusting to her rhythm. She found herself answering with confidence she did not know she possessed. Their proximity was electric without being improper, a study in restraint that drew more attention than extravagance ever could. Around them, faces rearranged themselves, and the sisters' smiles faltered. The fourth daughter felt the weight of the room, yet it no longer pressed her inward. It expanded her. The dance ended. Applause scattered like rain, uncertain, compelled. The Alpha King released her hand last, as if to confirm the reality of what had occurred. He thanked her with formality that honored them both. She curtsied, heart steady, and returned to her place by the fountain. The sisters converged, their words sharp and hurried, warning of consequences, of misread signals, of dangers that arrived dressed as kindness. She listened, then answered with a calm that surprised them. "Whatever follows," she said, "I will not pretend I was invisible." The Alpha King stood apart, watching the night recalibrate. He spoke with a counselor, his expression thoughtful, and the fourth daughter sensed the approach of gravity. Attention, once offered, cannot be reclaimed without cost. She felt the stir of fear, tempered by resolve. The gardens seemed different now, less obedient, more alive. Lanterns flickered, shadows lengthened, and the fountain kept its patient song. The night carried consequences in its pockets, and she felt them brush her knees as she stood. Some guests withdrew, offended by the disturbance, others leaned closer, sensing history's hinge. A matron murmured about propriety, a young lord smiled as if hope had been given permission to exist. The fourth daughter felt the ache of old lessons arguing with new evidence. She breathed through it, anchoring herself to the present. Whatever the Alpha King chose next would ripple outward, touching her family, her standing, her safety. The knowledge did not weaken her. It clarified her spine, straightening resolve into grace. As she lifted her gaze, she saw the Alpha King turn toward her again, decision gathering behind his eyes, and the garden seemed to hold its breath. For what came next, the Alpha King did not summon her again in public. Instead, a quiet message reached her as the lanterns burned lower and the music softened into its final measures. It was delivered without ceremony, spoken by a discreet attendant who did not meet her eyes. If she wished, she was invited to walk the eastern path beyond the hedges, where the gardens loosened their grip and the night breathed more freely. The words carried no command, yet refusal felt suddenly heavier than acceptance. She gathered her shawl and moved away from the crowd, her step steady despite the thunder of awareness in her chest. The eastern path curved toward shadow, its stones pale beneath moonlight, its borders softened by climbing roses left untamed. The sounds of the party faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the hush of leaves and the measured cadence of her own breath. She paused once, considering the habits that had kept her safe for years, then continued. To be chosen publicly had unsettled the world, to be seen privately might unmake her entirely. Still, she walked on, dignity drawn close like a second skin. He was waiting where the path opened into a small clearing, a place shaped less by design than by time. The Alpha King stood without entourage, his posture relaxed, his attention already hers. Moonlight traced the line of his shoulders and caught in his hair, lending him a quiet gravity. He did not speak at once. He allowed her arrival to complete itself, allowed her to stand without explanation. The courtesy steadied her. When he finally inclined his head, it was with the same recognition that had changed the garden earlier, now stripped of witnesses. "I wish to spare you the noise," he said, his voice low, as if mindful of the night itself. She nodded, accepting the intention without presuming more. He asked if she was comfortable. The question, simple and earnest, startled her. Comfort had not been a customary offering. She answered truthfully. "More than before," she said, and the admission felt like setting down a weight she had not known she carried. They walked a few steps together, then stopped where roses leaned close, their scent rich and faintly bruised. He spoke of the evening, of how quickly certainty turns brittle when questioned. He did not apologize for the attention he had given her, he explained it. "I noticed how you stood when you were overlooked," he said. "You did not diminish yourself to fit the omission." The word struck her with a force gentler than praise. She felt seen not for what she lacked, but for how she endured. She answered slowly, choosing care over protection. "Endurance is a habit," she said. "It grows when one is told often enough to expect little." The night seemed to listen. He considered her, eyes thoughtful, and she sensed a shift not toward romance, but toward truth. He asked what she feared most. The question pressed against old cautions. She inhaled, then spoke. "I fear becoming visible only as an exception," she said. "Chosen once, discarded later, remembered only as a mistake." The honesty of it left her exposed, yet lighter. He did not rush to soothe. He allowed the fear to stand between them, acknowledged. "I do not collect exceptions," he said at last. "I make decisions." The distinction mattered. It carved a space where hope could stand without trembling. She felt a warmth rise, unfamiliar and restrained. For the first time, possibility did not arrive disguised as rescue. From the clearing, the lanterns were distant stars. She thought of her sisters, of their sharpened warnings, of the lives they were trained to pursue. She spoke of family without bitterness, of how belonging can bruise as easily as it binds. He listened with the patience of one accustomed to consequence. When she finished, he asked if she regretted accepting his hand. The question invited autonomy, not compliance. She met his gaze. "No," she said. "I regret only the years I believed I should refuse." A sound carried from the gardens, laughter breaking, then reforming. The world had not paused for them. He acknowledged the pull of it with a glance. "What follows will not be gentle," he said. Attention sharpened scrutiny. She felt the truth of it settle, then answered with calm she did not rehearse. "I have survived gentler nights," she said. "Let them look." The resolve surprised her, then steadied. He stepped back, restoring a measured distance, as if honoring the boundary she had not named. "There is something I must do," he said, and the gravity in his tone drew her breath short. "Tomorrow, the court will ask questions. Tonight, the party expects reassurance." He hesitated, then added, I would have you present, not hidden, if you consent. The choice was placed carefully in her hands. She considered the path behind her, the crowd ahead, the clearing between. Visibility had been forced upon her once already, now it was offered. She lifted her chin. I will stand where I stood before, she said. If I am to be seen, let it be honestly. A smile touched his mouth, brief and unguarded, and vanished. Then we are aligned, he said. They turned back toward the gardens together, not touching, yet unmistakably connected by decision. As the lanterns grew brighter and the murmur swelled, she felt the old shame retreat, not defeated, but challenged by a truer companion. The Alpha King glanced at her once more, expression resolved. When they stepped into the light, the night shifted again, preparing to demand its price. They re-entered the gardens as if returning from a different season. The lanterns appeared brighter now, the music sharper, the laughter edged with intent. Faces turned with practiced surprise that failed to hide calculation. The fourth daughter felt the scrutiny land, familiar yet altered, as though the same gaze had learned a new grammar. She walked beside the Alpha King without touching him, their shared pace and agreement more binding than contact. The path parted for them, not out of reverence, but uncertainty, and she understood that uncertainty could be as powerful as favor. Her sisters were waiting, smiles assembled too quickly to be sincere. Relief flickered first, then alarm, then resolve. The eldest stepped forward, voice honeyed, remarking on the beauty of the night, on how fortunate they all were to witness such an occasion. The Alpha King replied with courtesy exact enough to be unmistakable, acknowledging the words without yielding ground. His attention returned to the fourth daughter as if drawn by gravity. She felt the smallest tremor of pride and anchored it with restraint. Pride unguarded had always been used against her. Tonight, she would carry it carefully. Conversation attempted to resume around them, but it snagged on the moment. Gentlemen offered bows that lingered too long, ladies measured the cut of her gown with new interest, seeking hidden signals. She answered greetings with calm civility, neither deferring nor provoking. The Alpha King spoke when it mattered, and the room learned to listen. When a counselor approached with a cautious observation about propriety, the Alpha King answered with a glance and a quiet assurance that the evening would proceed. The assurance did not explain, it declared. The counselor retreated, chastened by clarity. Music swelled, and with it the expectation of ceremony. The Alpha King led her toward the pavilion steps, not to dance again, but to stand where announcements were made. The choice was unmistakable. The fourth daughter felt the press of memory, years of being guided to edges, to shadows, but she stepped forward willingly. She knew the risk. Visibility invites narrative, and narrative can be cruel. Yet she felt steadied by the knowledge that her presence was not accidental. It had been chosen twice now, once in the open, once in the quiet. The repetition mattered. The Alpha King addressed the gathering with measured warmth, speaking of hospitality, of tradition, of the honor of shared evenings. He did not mention her at first. The delay tightened attention, drawing it inward. Then he spoke of discernment, of the value of composure, of how true bearing reveals itself under neglect more reliably than under praise. The fourth daughter felt her breath align with his cadence. She did not look at her sisters, though she felt their eyes burn. When he named her, clearly and without embellishment, the pavilion seemed to still. He invited her to remain near him for the remainder of the evening, not as ornament, but as guest. The language was precise, unassailable. A murmur rippled outward, threaded with surprise and dissent. She accepted with a bow that honored both herself and the space she was being granted. The applause that followed was hesitant, then steadier, propelled by the authority of decision. The sisters clapped too, hands tight, smiles strained. The fourth daughter met their gaze briefly, offering neither triumph nor apology. The restraint unsettled them more than defiance would have. As the evening progressed, she felt the contours of attention change. Questions came, some sincere, others testing. She answered with honesty shaped by discretion, refusing both false humility and provocation. The Alpha King observed without interference, intervening only when a comment strayed toward cruelty. His protection was not loud, it was effective. She noticed how he listened when she spoke, how he allowed her answers to stand without correction. The courtesy was not performative. It altered the room's temperature, cooling what had grown sharp. A matron approached with a remark about family obligation, her tone edged with warning. The fourth daughter replied with calm respect, acknowledging duty without surrendering autonomy. The exchange ended without spectacle, yet its significance lingered. Across the lawn, her sisters convened allies, voices low, strategies forming. The eldest attempted laughter that rang hollow. The middle sister watched with narrowed eyes, recalculating. The youngest faltered, uncertainty crossing her features. The fourth daughter felt a pang of compassion, unexpected and brief. Change rarely spares the innocent bystanders it creates. The Alpha King excused them from a circle of conversation and guided her toward the fountain once more. Water caught the light, stitching silver into darkness. He asked if the evening weighed upon her. She considered, then answered truthfully. "It does," she said, "but it no longer bends me." He nodded, acknowledging the distinction. "There will be consequence," he said. She smiled faintly. "There always was," she replied. The honesty bound them in a shared understanding that felt steadier than promise. From the pavilion, a voice rose, an announcement postponed too long. A noblewoman, emboldened by rumor, demanded clarification, her words dressed as concern. The challenge hung in the air, brittle and bright. The Alpha King turned, expression composed, and answered with restraint that sharpened the rebuke. He reminded the gathering that courtesy governs inquiry, and that guests are not exhibits. The response was final without being cruel. The noblewoman flushed and withdrew, murmurs chasing her retreat. The fourth daughter felt a surge of relief tempered by awareness. Protection invites resentment as surely as admiration invites desire. The night deepened. Some guests departed early, offended by the disturbance to expectation. Others lingered, sensing a shift worth witnessing. The fourth daughter's presence became a quiet axis around which attention rotated. She was invited into conversations that would once have closed before her approach. She accepted selectively, mindful that access can be another form of trap. The Alpha King respected her discernment, stepping in only when asked. Their coordination was wordless, a choreography learned in hours rather than years. Her sisters approached once more, this time without their audience. The eldest spoke quickly, warning of reputations and fragile futures. The fourth daughter listened, then replied with gentle firmness. "I will not be your cautionary tale," she said. "Nor will I be your secret." The words landed with quiet finality. The sisters withdrew, unsettled by the boundary. The youngest lingered, eyes searching, then followed, leaving a question unspoken. The fourth daughter felt the ache of it, then let it pass. As the music waned, the Alpha King leaned closer, his voice low. "Tomorrow will require clarity," he said. "Tonight has announced intention, daylight will demand declaration." She felt the weight of the word settle, not as threat, but as horizon. She met his gaze, steady. "I will stand as I am," she said. He inclined his head, the gesture both acknowledgement and vow. The lanterns burned down to steady embers, and the garden breathed, altered. As the final notes faded, she sensed the night yielding its last refuge. What followed would be spoken aloud, and there would be no retreat from its echo. Dawn arrived without ceremony, pale light slipping through tall windows and settling on polished floors that still remembered the night's footsteps. The fourth daughter stood alone for a moment before the household stirred, her reflection faint in the glass, her posture composed by choice rather than instruction. What had happened could not be folded back into rumor, it would move forward now, carrying names and consequences. She felt neither triumph nor dread, only a clarity sharpened by sleep that had been brief and untroubled. When she descended the stairs, servants paused, unsure whether to bow more deeply or not at all. She acknowledged them with the same courtesy she always had, and felt the power of continuity steady her nerves. By the time the sun fully claimed the sky, the Alpha King had summoned the court. The hall filled with voices modulated into respect, the air taut with expectation. The fourth daughter entered at his side, not clinging, not distant, her presence unadorned. The whispers followed, but they lacked last night's confidence. People straightened, faces rearranged themselves, and old certainties learned caution. She felt the pull of memory tug at her sleeves, urging retreat, but she had already crossed the threshold that turns habit into history. She lifted her chin and allowed the room to see her fully, not as novelty, but as fact. The Alpha King spoke with the economy of one accustomed to wait. He did not rehearse the previous evening, nor did he soften its implications. He named her openly, described the qualities he had witnessed: composure under neglect, honesty without display, courage that required no audience. He spoke of choice as responsibility, not indulgence, and of partnership as recognition rather than reward. The court listened, compelled by the absence of flourish. The fourth daughter felt the words gather around her like a garment woven to fit, not borrowed, not imposed. A murmur rose when he declared his intention, the sound layered with disbelief, admiration, and resistance. She met it with stillness. Her sisters stood among the assembled families, expressions caught between calculation and shock. The eldest's mouth tightened, already measuring salvage. The middle sister stared as if a rule had broken. The youngest's eyes shone with something like relief. The fourth daughter felt a twinge of sorrow for what had been built on her exclusion, then let it pass. Sorrow had never been her strongest defense. When the Alpha King invited response, it came carefully. A nobleman questioned precedent, a matron murmured concern for appearances. The Alpha King answered each with calm precision, never raising his voice, never conceding ground. Then he turned to the fourth daughter and asked her to speak, not as validation, but as acknowledgement of agency. The hall leaned forward. She felt the old tremor rise, then settle. She spoke simply, naming her willingness to stand where she stood, to accept the visibility and its cost, to refuse both secrecy and spectacle. She did not promise perfection, she promised presence. The honesty landed cleanly, and the room exhaled. The sisters approached afterward, compelled by necessity rather than affection. The eldest offered congratulations framed as concern, the words tight with envy. The fourth daughter accepted them with civility, neither yielding nor retaliating. The middle sister remained silent, eyes searching for leverage that did not exist. The youngest stepped closer, voice small, and said she was glad. The fourth daughter touched her hand, brief and steady, and felt something mend that she had not known was broken. She turned away without ceremony, carrying the moment intact. As the court dispersed, alliances shifted with audible clicks. Invitations recalibrated themselves. Some faces hardened, others softened. The fourth daughter noticed without attachment. She felt anchored by a resolve that did not require approval. The Alpha King remained beside her, attentive without possession. He asked if she wished to step outside, and she agreed. They walked into the courtyard, where the morning air smelled of stone warmed by sun. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet held. He told her the choice would test them both, that scrutiny would sharpen, that the ease of anonymity was gone. She answered with a faint smile. "Anonymity never kept me safe," she said. He considered her, then nodded. They spoke of boundaries, of pace, of the difference between expectation and desire. He listened as if her words mattered because they were hers, not because they aligned with his own. The respect settled into something steadier than passion. When they returned inside, a messenger waited, bearing news of invitations withdrawn and others extended. The Alpha King waved them aside. "Let the dust settle," he said. The fourth daughter felt gratitude not for protection, but for patience. She knew that time would do its work, revealing allies and adversaries alike. She did not rush to claim her place. She occupied it. By afternoon, the household moved with altered rhythm. Servants addressed her with care, not fear. Counselors measured their words. The fourth daughter walked the corridors with quiet assurance, noting the light, the echoes, the way space responds to confidence. She paused by a window and watched clouds gather, the promise of weather pressing low. She felt ready for it. When the Alpha King joined her, he offered no grand declaration, only companionship. The simplicity was its own pledge. As evening approached, the first thunder sounded, distant but clear. The fourth daughter stood with the Alpha King at the window as rain began to fall, the garden darkening into reflection. The world beyond the glass shifted, paths washed clean, petals pressed into new shapes. She thought of the girl she had been the night before, standing at the edge of light, and felt neither disdain nor longing. She had stepped forward, and the ground had held. The Alpha King turned to her, expression resolved, and said that tomorrow they would speak again, publicly, finally. She met his gaze without flinching. Whatever came next would be faced in daylight, with her name spoken aloud.